Hi, this is Carla again. So, chapter 4 was about assessment using multiple windows, and I loved the way the author described the word windows. They defined it in this context as combinations of sources, methods, and context teachers use to gather information about their students. And I think that being a teacher in the classroom every day, um, I can definitely attest to the validity in that. Um, so the first section about the sources, the methods, and the context then gets broken down into other parts. So primary sources of information, obviously the child, other children, parents, specialists, other adults, and records. I know it talked about in this chapter about, as a teacher receiving a student, do you look at the other records or do you get to know the child on your own before you look at the records? I feel like this chapter advocated for taking all the information that was readily available to be a better educator for your student. I personally like to know a little bit about the students that are coming into my class. There's not much in the way of official records, and I know that Chapter 5 talks more about actual recording of that data and collecting the information. But I do know that just in terms of like one of the methods of obtaining information, it's nice to talk to the teacher who had them last and get any information from their parents that they're willing to provide. So some of the methods of obtaining information are through observation, discussions or interviews of the children, collection of products, or discussion or interviews of parents and other adults. And as I say that, I do have a questionnaire that I send out at my open house and in my new student packet, which just tells me a little bit of information about the family, about the parents' take on their child. What are their child's favorite things? What are their, are they scared of anything? I also like to know what kind of expectations the parents have for the 3-year-old preschool. So that's definitely something that I use on a regular basis. One of the first classes I took about assessment was a training that was put on by my place of employment my very first year, and it was on formative assessment. And it was very interesting about, and I think it fits in context with what the author was talking about in this chapter, that to look for those windows of opportunity to observe and assess a student's behavior or, whatever it is you're trying to assess. So the context need to be considered, the physical space, what kind of materials are available, what activity are you asking them to do? What activities are available? Who are the people involved, the diverse people? And then how much teacher structure is there? And I know in our discussion forum this week, we were challenged with, what's the best way to assess Marcia in terms of her physical and verbal aggression. And I thought it was very interesting to kind of come up with my plan for that, but then also to read what other people used as their window. And I think that points out how you can use other people's assessment, how valuable your teacher's aid is to get the complete picture. I know right now I work with a team of, actually have, on a daily basis, I have 2 to 3 assistants, but the people that rotate in and out of my classroom is total in 5. And so there's a lot of information that I try to pass along, especially in terms of behavioral issues and behavioral modifications that we're trying, response to interventions methods that we might be implementing. Those are need to know pieces of information that I like to pass on to even the teachers that rotate in. So that's something. And then when I'm seeing a behavior in a child, or I'm seeing a lack of a skill, like I teach 3-year-olds, so I'm thinking in terms of like pencil grip and cutting and You know, when kids are afraid to get messy and dirty. My little Japanese boy, it's taken him a whole year to be okay with getting paint or ink on his hands and then being able to wash it off. So when I see those kind of behaviors, I try to make those aware. Well, first I ask other people, do they see them too, or is this something that's just specific to Miss Carla's interaction with the student? And then if they do see it and it's something that we're trying to correct or address or improve, then I pass along that information. So I think that that's kind of like how the chapter ends up, where it says identify the consideration importance in selecting an assessment window. So first, identify the behavior to be assessed. Use authentic assessment windows, maximize the frequency of chance of seeing a behavior, and use multiple sources, measures, and contexts. We've done this year. We've kept a running record for a few of the behavioral challenges in the classroom, and it was my supervisor's recommendation to see if we could establish a pattern, and we did. With the one boy, most of his behavioral issues occurred during times of transition. So that would refer back to, the amount of teacher structure, right? When there's less teacher structure, he was struggling regulating himself. And I think that kind of fits. Those are the trends that I've seen, like I said, just in the 3 years that I've been teaching, and I think that that's what the text referred to. It's encouraging us as educators to incorporate authentic assessment and the curriculum-based measurement that we learned about again in the modules, to incorporate those on a regular basis as a way to supplement the high-stakes achievement testing that we also have going on, because it's my understanding, as information has been presented to me and everything that I've read about those achievement tests, they do not help you correct the instruction. They don't help you in real time. They are, by the time you find out that information, it's too late. So like in Mrs. Begay, is that her name in the modules? But like in those scenarios I'm sorry, I can't talk. In the scenarios posted in the modules with Mrs. Begay and Jose and Luis and I can't remember his other name, but they, that whole assignment was showing us different ways to assess students, different ways to collect and record the data, which we'll talk about in Chapter 5, and with the goal of influencing instruction. And I know that on the lesson plans that we fill in for Mount Vernon, it's always like, what are you going to do with this information? Okay, how is this going to impact further instruction? And so those are the trends that I noticed in the chapter. And I think that ties right into how it applies as an educator, how I should apply it as an educator. I think it's one of the most challenging things, especially when teaching 3-year-olds. I've tried several different methods. After completing this chapter and the module, I was thinking maybe I needed to spend some time to create some tally sheets or some checklists that I could use to try to keep. But one of the challenges is deciding what behavior you're going to assess. And then currently I'm a lead teacher, but I have 22 students, and all of my assistants are not striving to the professional level, or they don't have the working knowledge that I have about these things. So I think that I need to do a better job of coming up with a system first that I feel like is effective, and then explaining the implementation of that system. And then again, consistency is just difficult, but I think that it's necessary, especially when you get into kindergarten and beyond. Not even 4s, because you're trying to do kindergarten readiness, right? So their assessments will begin. So anyway, that's my take on Chapter 4. Sorry it's so long. Have a good one.